stuff later. This is stuff that we don't ever get to talk about because there's always something going on.
Right. Well, what was it that Linda said besides the?
It was the third thing. There was
It was something besides the train.
the train. It was the covered wagon.
I think they were the two.
There was
Covered
something
wagon.
else, but she'll
And
forgive
I don't
us.
think I've mentioned the covered wagons, have I?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So when grandfather was a preacher, I get the impression from what you're saying that it was a much more of a evangelical thing. And when you came along, it was that too, but it was also a heck of a lot more administrative.
Right, right, and it's even more now.
Really.
And the type of programs are different. There are a lot of changes that take place in the church. Some of them are good, and some of them are just changes. So that was where my father probably could work up a real enthusiasm and a persuasive.
Let me get you to drop your hand because your microphone's right there. Okay.
That was a persuasive way of preaching that he had, and I didn't. My delivery and my study and my sermons that I had written and prepared would maybe have, depending on the subject, it might be 1 point, might be a 1-point sermon, or a 3-point sermon. But 3 points were very popular during most of my ministry. I felt like 3 strong points in a sermon, people could leave with some things on their hearts that they wanted to continue to think about. And it could be illustrated with experiences of my own with people as they grew in faith and grew in evangelistic commitment. All of that were goals. They were goals in my preaching, that people would be moved. I like to just mention this illustration. The district superintendent of the Durham district, the last 3 years, was a girl who joined the church about a 12-year-old down near Kinston, a rural church, when I was in there holding a revival for a friend who was a preacher. And she said, I joined the church when you held a revival for us. And I felt proud of that, because she's gone on now. She's been a district superintendent, and right now is an official for the general conference, for our North Carolina conference. She is taking the elderly ministers who are retired and using them to encourage and share ideas with ministers just beginning. Now, I don't think I'll be in on that. I haven't volunteered because of my health. I don't think I can do it physically. I'd love to spiritually, but I'm trying to hold back and see what it's going to do. I'll have to explain to her, because for 2 years she was my associate minister at Highland Church in Raleigh.
And that's Hope? Is that Hope? Who was that?
Hope is now our district superintendent. I had known Hope when she was just a little girl in her home, because I held a revival in her home church. And it was just in Gates County was her home church. And she was too young to remember, but she knew it was true. We've talked about it a good bit, that I spent the week in her home, spent my nights there. They took care of the preacher. No hotels out there in Gates County. So but
Let me ask you this. Sarah's kids, John Stedman's kids, and their kids, you know, the chances of them having back-to-back preachers in their family is pretty slim. What do you think, what would be one of the most important things you could tell them that you and your dad would absolutely agree upon about the importance of Christ and how important it is to you?
I would say that I had better treatment in the church than my father did.
Bring your hand down.
My father.
Bring your hand down. Go ahead.
My father was in smaller churches, and sometimes churches that nobody else wanted to go to. He was put on those places. Well, I began that way, but I had advantages that he didn't have, in that so many of my friends were already preachers. They were preachers that had come, that I wound up having a church at such and such a place, and maybe the district superintendent was a friend of my father's. And so I had a little, for some reason, and I've read some of my father's letters to his district superintendent and see that he felt overlooked at times. I think he did too. But I know how he worked on a sermon and how he would pray for freedom and looseness in his preaching. And I did the same sort of thing. I would write out my sermons in full without the illustrations. The illustrations were just abbreviations that I could just touch some subject that was important and work it into a true life story someone had shared with me.